My name is Jeremy Bentley. I'm the CEO and founder of Smartlogic. We started the company in 2006. We've done about 300 content intelligence projects in that time since then. I'm going to share with you some of that, and I'm going to share with you an idea called content intelligence, which may come as a new acronym for everybody, CI, not BI. But hopefully it explains some of the stuff that we do, or at least by the end of this presentation you will have a good idea. We are upstairs too. We're one of the sponsors here, so welcome to come and ask us questions afterwards. Just to start, and this is probably maybe one of the least technical presentations that you're going to have here, but I thought it's important really just to start with a few basics. Why are we here, and where did our world start, and what was the first degree of order that we applied to content? So first degree of order, filing, right? Nice to see it in the old-fashioned sense, but actually we've got many more files and filing cabinets in our virtual content management systems and organized by our wonderful search engines than here. But it reminds us of what we're actually dealing with. We're dealing with old-fashioned files, and we're also dealing with 80% of a company or an enterprise's or organization's unstructured information is in these logical equivalents, or these virtual equivalents. And whether you believe Gartner every 19 months or a guy called Steve Arnold every 8 months, it's doubling very quickly. And we'll come to some of the reasons why that's putting some pressure on Solr or any other search engine that we may came to mention. Abstract higher and get to a second level of order. Of course, we talk about index management. And if we can't see in our own minds what a search engine index looks like, librarians know that they look like this. And of course, these were the way that organizations until about 1981, when the search engine sort of started to become vaguely functional, actually used to organize. You'd have librarians who organized it. And this actually introduced quite trouble, because although of course it's much easier than you don't have to walk up and down corridors to go and find the actual files, you can walk here and let your fingers do the walking. The point about it is that then endless debates arose around how should we index our content. And of course we start to see the rise of arguments and discussions that take days and weeks and months to actually decide, is it belonging in this index or that index, because it could only be one index because it was a manual process. So the idea of taxonomies sort of came back, came into fore, and the whole concept of library science and information science actually has come from here. But the point about indexing in the second degree of order, this is a manual process. And actually, if we look again in a minute, you'll see it's still a manual process. We don't call it indexing, we now call it tagging. And it's not the indexing the search engine's doing, it's the manual indexing that the human's doing when that document or that piece of content is firstly loaded onto the system. Right? Today, it's still a manual task, and we still have a problem with that. But it's a second degree of order, it's better. The third degree of order goes a little higher. It basically automates the first and second degrees, and this is our world. This is the world of many different humans, different types of audiences, using different portals and different business applications, and driving lots of different content services, be they search engines, and usually every organization we come across has many of them. There might be Solr in one place, there might be a Google search appliance doing something somewhere else, there might be a SharePoint in there might be lots of content services, lots of content feeds, content management systems, records management systems, all these information's stored in a very heterogeneous, very mixed environment. Anyone here not familiar with that? We then look at a couple of things. I call it a 10-year flatline expectation gap. In 2001, IDC did a enterprise search survey, and they asked the users, not the people who implemented it, not us who understand it, but the users who have to apply it and use it to do their work. And in 2001, 50% or slightly less were successful in finding what they were looking for. Okay? 2011, a decade later, we sponsored a piece of independent research from a company called MindMeter. We find that 52% cannot find the information there in their enterprise search system. So we haven't been resting for 10 years. The search industry has changed considerably. The technology has been massively invested in. There's been huge amounts of investment by venture capitalists and lots of search companies, and there's been sales of search engines to bigger vendors, and you can argue that. But so we've been busy, but actually from a user's perspective, they're still moaning, and there's an expectation gap between what they're spending and what they're getting. Does anyone care to challenge me on that? No. And really what has happened? Well, 1993, Bill Clinton, President of the United States of America for an 8-year term. He retired in 2001. And when each time a president comes to an end, they actually have to, the National Archives take the content that they consider to be important and they give it to the National Archives. 4 terabytes was Bill Clinton's contribution. From 2001 to 2009, George Jr. took on the same job, the same responsibilities. Anyone want to hazard a guess how much his contribution was into the National Archives in that 8-year period? 80 terabytes. So this is all the matter of record. So what we're seeing is a 20 times increase in volume, essentially a like-for-like comparison of the job. We can argue whether we like his policies or whether he did, but the job description was the same, and the country wasn't that much different, and all these things. It was just, this is a nice way of hopefully seeing this is what's happening across countries, across enterprises, in organizations, in government. This 20 times increase in information volume is actually significant change in the environment, right? In the search environment. And actually I was amused by this because back in 1996, out of an information science textbook, I found this. Search gets harder as data sets grow, and the number of documents the user is willing to browse is the same. So if anyone needs reminding that this is not a new problem, this is perhaps a small amusement. But I think as we're working in search, we know that this is the case. Actually trying to get a handle on 20 times increases in volume is hard. We have to invent things. And it's that invention that I want to introduce, which is this idea of content intelligence, which I'll come to in a minute. So, you know, we know the base problems of search when it's different vocabulary and ambiguity, and we can think about how, you know, oh, it's those users, they don't tag the content properly, so how does my poor search engine possibly manage to get the facets accurate if they don't give us quality metadata in the first place? Well, the point is, actually what we end up with is user experiences that are either with missing results or too many results. We have different ways of saying the same thing. You say moon buggy, we say lunar roving vehicle, and we have ways of not being clear. You say apple, and I don't know what you mean. What context do you mean? Right? So those are very basic, simple problems, but basically missing results and too many results is what happens. And if you apply that over the 20 times increase in volume, it just gets worse. And we may be able to deal with it, our indexes may be able to scale to petabytes, but actually the little human brain can't deal with it because it manages 1 page of results, that's it. So you've got to try and cram on that 1 page something much more interesting for them, so that they can actually get a chance to discover the information that they're looking for. And I'm not going to go into this, but conventional search in much detail you can read, but I mean there's a whole load of apparent drawbacks and not so apparent, but things like, you know, easy multiple search terms, out-of-date results, unrestricted geographies, you know, not so apparent. There's no something to ground the user in the context. There's no concept of quality around which is the right resource to use first. And our information assets are no different from our physical assets. This is a picture, I think, out of an Amazon warehouse. Impossible to organize that if you don't label it, right? And our information assets are no different. But actually, if you think about the number of articles that there are in an Amazon warehouse, there are far fewer articles in there than there are necessarily pieces of content in one's content management systems within a large enterprise. We've done a project with NASA. It's been running for about now 3 years, and for the last 2 years, since they went live, took a year to implement, they've been running the largest Google cluster, which has been crawling over the 50 years of content to do with manned spaceflight at about 2 million documents a day. Right? This is a lot of information asset that actually has to be labeled. And if we don't pay attention to the rather gritty subject of metadata, you'll see that we're going to get ourselves into even more user expectation gap trouble than we're going to at the moment. So knowing what you have is important, and labeling it is also important. And I don't think anyone really disagrees with it. We certainly know the importance of labeling on the web, because we all spend a fortune doing SEO, buying adverts, optimizing our sites, putting in metadata onto the websites that we want to have people find using whichever web search engine you want to use. And this is a paradox to the effort that goes into creating metadata inside an enterprise. So we want to be found on the web using a search engine. We spend a lot of effort on a small amount of content to make sure that we're on the top of the list. You know, it's quite Darwinian. Then we go inside the enterprise and you think, oh, the minute of that meeting that's really important, it's just signed off a 50 billion aeroplane investment program. Now who's going to tag that up and put that in so it can be found again, right? And be found again as a matter of record in 7 years' time when it's going to get reviewed. No one spends any effort, no one spends much effort in making sure that it's properly tagged, it's properly put away. And then let's take the 200-page report that actually justified the purchase and the investment in the first place. Is someone really expected to sit there and write up all the tags of the 70 articles, the 70 subjects that are mentioned in that report that gets it there? No. But how is the search engine meant to do its job if it doesn't have it? And how do I structure it? So we're sort of having to come back to, because of this change in volume, we're having to come back to some rather normal disciplines which we used to have to do manually way back when companies had libraries and they had specialists. We're actually now having to start to think again about our information architecture. How do I structure it? And what metadata do I need to keep? And of course, it's not just what we need to know now. We've done projects with banks who've had to suddenly shine a lens at their content and say, what's our exposure to Greece? Right? Whereas before it was the sovereign debt, so they never thought about that. Right? So the content has to be able to be pulled out, if you like, looking through specific lenses of identification, and you may not know that when you're saving it. So you've got to be able to do that at some point in the future. So metadata becomes a very important subject. And if that's the only thing you hear from me today is, I've got a metadata problem, you just have to think Smartlogic. So this third degree content universe is actually quite big, right? It's not just, we're here at a Lucene Solr event, one of many search engines, and we could equally have been at an event and met at a content management conference. We could have been talking at our e-discovery show, or we might be looking at the process management and workflow. But we've invested as an industry and as companies and as in IT in all of these areas. And every company and every organization, every government agency of all kinds, both public and private, have a lot of these, right? But this third degree content universe is only was built before we were dealing with 20 times increases in volumes over an 8-year period. Right? So there is actually there's a suggestion, and this is my suggestion, or our suggestion, is that there actually needs a fourth level of order. And that fourth level of order, very similar to how business intelligence was a higher level of intelligence over data, well, content intelligence is a higher level of order over content. Right? Has to do the same thing. It's too much of it down below. You've got to be able to abstract up another level of order. And it's that fourth degree of order that I want to introduce you to. And really, in that status quo diagram, you remember, it's adding that layer of intelligence into it, so that our search engines, our content management systems, and our user experience actually has an attempt to do a better job, to put the user experience into context, to apply the metadata consistently across all the different repositories, to be able to help the search engine get their indexes up to quality so that the facets actually work and the users don't come back to you later and say, can you fix that? Or the classification actually works, so it doesn't classify apple as a fruit but puts it in the right context as where it should be. So you think of Semaphore really as a triangle. From a user's perspective, is they think about their domain, their business vocabulary, That's how they want to have classified. If you go to a content management system, typically a form will pop up, and down will come a list of their business vocabulary that you're meant to tag this content with. The trouble is, it's very difficult, because if you're a decent-sized enterprise, you're going to have a list of 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 terms, because that's how you like to sort your content. So when the user has come back after lunch, and we have many examples where a whole local government organisation, the whole of a county in the United Kingdom has tagged all of their millions of documents with the correct tag called local government. Right? It hurts, because you've now got a pile called local government, and it's no worse than having no pile at all called local. So the business vocabulary is very important, and that model of that business vocabulary we'll come to in a minute. Second thing that happens is we have to apply that business vocabulary, those terms that people want to call things, we have to apply them so we get a classification decision. Right? So we are making decisions about what a piece of content is about. We can then use that classification decision to inform a user action and expose that business vocabulary to generate context. And what that means is, on this side we're producing metadata, on that side we're providing a contextual user experience, that side we're having to expose semantic models, and we'll come to what they are, and actually the thing that's doing all of that is semantic software, which is which is the content intelligence, the basic technology behind content intelligence. And it's those four things which I was going to spend maybe another 10-15 minutes talking about. So, metadata, semantic models, contextual user experience, semantic software. Today, if we think about our metadata processes, well, firstly, it's manual. Okay? I know we can say we've got wonderful algorithms in our search engines, but what they require is actually something to get going with. So if you haven't been told what a piece of content is about, it's very difficult to suck it out and decide what it is. I know that we can count the words, I know we can do all those sorts of interesting things and come up with some sort of loose statistical idea that this is an important subject, but the definitive, this is called about petrol and this is about gasoline, that's never going to get arranged until we've actually understand that it's properly tagged. Right? So it's a manual process, and we rely on the users, the people, the editors usually, to put it in, the people who wrote the document. And then what they have to do is they have to use a single unified one-size-fits-all approach, because it's impossible to manage multiple systems of classification because it's too expensive. It just takes too long. The only people who I've actually seen who've really done a really good job of manual tagging, if you've seen any of the output from the WikiLeaks stuff for the US Army, beautifully tagged. Right? Beautifully tagged because they have an army who can tag things, and they're told, go and tag that document to this standard right now. It's a really good example of what you can, how quickly you can get around quality content if it's properly tagged, actually. But you do need to be the US Army with that huge amount of manpower to actually go off and tag accurately. So, second time is it then takes this one-size-fits-all approach. It takes a long time to craft and build and manually apply, usually called an argument between two different taxonomists deciding where it belongs. And then they have to do the whole thing from start to finish, and it's not iterative, it's like a thing. So this is today, this is its reputation, and this is why some people shun away from it. And we'll show you technology, those of us in this room, technologists, we can make a better world even of this. But what you end up with is low quality tags and a high cost to apply. So, don't do it. That's what happens. No one does it. With content intelligence, the tagging process is automatic. You can take a multiple approach for the various domains or the audiences that one's looking at, and you don't have to do it all in one go. So this example I was giving about exposure to grease. Actually, if that's the subject that's most interesting at the moment, write, if you like, a lens that just exposes grease. The rest of it just happens to have a traditional search engine experience, and that's what they expect. But if you've got a really important subject, then we can give a whole different quality of experience and a quality of tending to the information asset and quality of records management and quality of these things by attending to those subjects. Okay, so it's an iterative process. B, it addresses the issue of the one-size-fits-all. It also, because we can throw good quality technology like natural language processing algorithms and things, we can help shorten the time to build these things. We don't have to have academics in a room writing ontologies. We can derive the terms and help the human, assist the human very, very quickly. And you end up with high quality tags and a low cost to apply. So what are these semantic models? Semantic model looks a bit like this. This is a taxonomy. I'm sure you know this, but just a sort of quick recap. Semantic models are, or in this case taxonomic, it's a hierarchy, which is where we have an agreed preferred term. Everything that comes into an enterprise about to do with Ford, we want to call it the Ford Motor Company, right? And it belongs in automotive sectors, and it owns the Ford Motor Credit Company. We can also add in some synonyms for it. So actually, if a user comes and says, "Oh, give me a price on F," doesn't mean give me a price on the 6th letter of the alphabet. If we know F is equal to the ticker symbol for Ford, we can say, well, did you mean, did you want a price on Ford Motor Company? Right? We can add in locations and things. So this idea of a model becomes quite a rich domain descriptor. We then add in relationships between Ford and, if in this case, BMW or Daimler Chrysler. And we're adding in the related links between Ford competes with BMW. Ford is influenced by the current bond price. And this is something that gets built up. But then when you put it to work, it's worth putting the effort in to build it up, because you can then drive the user experience, automate compliance and distribution tasks, right? And to provide all sorts of unstructured content integration, the main parts of things that people want to do with content. And it makes building search-based applications that much easier. And the contextual user experience becomes quite interesting, because whereas before we were talking about you know, some of the implied and the inherent and not so inherent aspects of a poor search experience, a contextual search experience is a very high quality one. We might have best bets, so that we're telling the user where's the best place to go for a specific answer. Not sourced deep in the search engine with a hard code linked, but actually sorted in a layer a lot much higher up in the content intelligence layer. We might have taxonomy results so that we can see where we fit. This is not a breadcrumb of journey, it's a breadcrumb of subject. So Apple belongs in mobile-centric, manufacturers belongs in companies. And we can at any point move around this map of content and discover. We might, and you can look a bit further, but, and we're upstairs, so we'll show it to you if you would like to see it. But I think one of the other sides of it is the ability to actually put the user, not look at the content, but actually look at the structure of the content. And that makes it much easier to keep them grounded in the one page, which we accept is what users can only deal with, the little human brain can only deal with. And we end up with something here, where if this plays, we're looking for, in this case, I think Buzz. Now Buzz Aldrin, he happens to be Edwin Aldrin. He's an astronaut. We are now putting him at the center of the map. We can see he was part of Apollo 11. If we wanted to go and see Apollo 11, we knew it had all these vehicles, and right. So as one is a user, one is kept grounded in the subject that one's interested in. Okay. And what that adds is a significant level of usability, and we'll come to what their values are in a minute. Now the fourth one, semantic software. Ours is called Semaphore, but there are others. It needs to have all of this in it, right? It needs to have the ability to manage these models. It needs to have the ability to analyze text so you can build models far quickly. It needs to have content both as manual and assisted, because not everyone relies on the total automatic content. They might want to assist the user to get that list down from 5,000 down to 3, and then they pick which ones they want. It needs to have contextual navigation services in it, and it needs to have semantic reasoning and processing in it. Right? And from a very simple search perspective, this is how it integrates. And this is the Solr picture. At classification time, the collector normalizer, normally nudge, but not always, right? Which is that collector normalizer. That calls out to classification server and says, hello, I've just crawled this corpus of documents, what metadata should I append into the index? Right, so what additional value should I get that the users probably didn't put in when they put this document in 3 years ago, or last week, or yesterday, or 5 minutes ago? So Semaphore then sends back a tag, or 5 tags, or 20 tags, depending on what is relevant. And it's a quite a sophisticated rules-based engine. It can be beautifully managed. And if anyone here has, tried to play with the sort of, I don't know, fast-like classification systems, very hard work and very inflexible once it's in place. And this is the exact opposite of that. This is a highly flexible, user-driven system where you don't have to get down and hard code absolutely everything. Much, much easier. So we are now augmenting the Solr index. And at query time, we are capturing the query, and then we're then providing our semantic enhancement, in this case to Solr. So Solr has a semantically enhanced user experience, right? So that the Solr experience is in context very similar to the one I've just showed you. Right? So we integrate at two ends. We integrate at the query time and we integrate at index time. Right? And that's all absolutely standard out of the Semaphore for Solr system. Okay. We also offer a search application framework, which is the rapid search application, so that if one has users that are crying out for a rapid search deployment, this search application framework is best of breed techniques and look and feel for a search application. And then you can play with the CSSs and change how it looks, but actually all the techniques are embedded in that, so you can have a quick win for the user community. So that fourth degree of order, right, is now adding a layer of stuff on top of all of these things. And we're now starting to turn a little bit of, well, why is it used? Well, if we think about the whole content lifecycle, the creation of information is the first thing. People spend money making information. Publishing companies spend a fortune of money making information. Companies that produce research reports equally. Next thing that people may need to do is some idea of knowledge recovery. I know that the information is in this enterprise somewhere. How do I get it? How do I recover it? Quite a lot of the NASA project was about two things. One was that the engineers who made Saturn rockets are retiring or have retired, right? And of course the space shuttle has been retired too, so they're having to go back to rockets that were built and used, or the rocketry, the science of rocketry that was used in the 60s. So there's knowledge in the system, except it's in lots of different systems, and we now need to go across and we want to bring it all together. We've got to recover that knowledge. Right? It's not a problem that's isolated to NASA, it's a problem that's actually any engineering or knowledge-based organization that is dealing with the baby boom bump with having a retirement crisis in about 5 years' time. Right? So the universal issue, but knowledge recovery is very important, and there's a lot of economics in it. If I've written a proposal 2 years ago and somebody else has come back and we've now got to rewrite parts of it, why don't I know how to find it properly? Second, in that cycle of content intelligence, the next thing is content analytics. We need to be able to analyze the web, maybe. Maybe I'm a manufacturer, maybe I'm a police force, and I want to actually go and analyze the information that's out there that I don't have control of. And the whole sphere of content analytics fits in this content intelligence space. Data loss prevention, risk and compliance. The concept that we've done projects where we the software, the content intelligence software has replaced teams of paralegals whose job was to read legal contracts with a view to classifying them to make sure whether they're in compliance or out of compliance. Right? So as we go around this circle of content intelligence, you have to put that in there. And of course, monetization. And in terms of some projects which we can share with you, ultimately it all comes down to the rather in the engine house, someone's got to fill the boiler with coal to build the steam to make turn the engine to make the steam train work. And in search, the very thing that makes the search work is metadata. I think we all know that, but the thing is we're not attending to it. We're dealing with the search engine, and this problem might happen uphill or upstream, but actually we still have to deal with the results of not having it downstream. So at the center of content intelligence is the provision of metadata in all its shapes and forms. And then some of the solutions that we can point to. We talked a little bit about the knowledge acquisition and recovery. One of the 300 projects we've done, UBS use it for government risk and compliance. Occidental Petroleum use it for cross-platform content integration across many different places. Intel use it for web self-service. If you go to intel.com, it's using a content intelligence system. It's Semaphore. And Harry Potter is using it to micro-target and distribute content. And these are just sort of 5 reasonable examples of what I think is happening, which is that there's a slow awareness that metadata is not good, our content is an asset, assets should be managed just like any other asset. We'd never dream of not looking after our buildings or our equity or our money in the bank, and if we're in the information world, managing the information asset is just as important. Right? And search is clearly part of that, but not the whole of that. This is the next abstraction, the next level of order to actually provide a higher degree of control and governance over all of those information assets. And if you are interested in coming to talk to us, you're not alone, and we welcome you coming to talk to us about any of these. And if you have questions, I'm upstairs, or ask me or send me an email or something. So the question was, are we helping any publishing companies? And the answer is quite a few. If they're a new media company, there's a different use case, but the old media company is having to deal with competition from the web-based sort of new media. And so actually what they're doing is they see that there's an issue of wanting to sell in interesting ways the content that they've got, so micro-targeting new client bases with the content they've already got. And so it's, if you like, focusing that lens on specific areas of their corpus so that they can start to, I don't know, I used the example before, but they want to sell, they've got a prospect who wants their wonderful seafood content. Well, actually, you've got to be able to identify seafood content and be able to sell it to them. So there's a micro-targeting issue which can be solved using this. And if you're a new media company, there's a whole side around, if you like, monetizing the advertisements or content with content that people are looking at the same time. We're happy to talk to you upstairs. They're all well-known, American companies, European companies. Maybe one last thing before you go. Upstairs we can show you our iPad app, because it's a user experience. It's a search user experience, and increasingly as the keyboards disappear, how one actually drives content through, pushing things is quite important, and getting the context there is equally tricky. So you're welcome to come and look at that too.